Carl, what have you done?
Think anyone will notice? Mr. Carl Jackson, right?
Carl Jackson was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. After the sudden death of his mother at the age of 11, he moved between LA and Orlando, Florida, trying to find his way in life.
So I'm clearly a Carl Jackson fan.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Although he was introduced to hard work, faith, and family values, as a struggling teen, he wandered down the path of least resistance, finding himself jailed twice. By the grace of God, he attended an evangelical church and found that there was a better way and accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior.
There's just no fake stuff about Carl Jackson.
Now, on the Salem Podcast Network, Carl has launched on a journey to help people of all races and backgrounds to discover facts of America's true past, as well as realize the benefits of utilizing their God-given gifts and talents, which far outweigh any benefit from a government subsidy or program.
Real dangerous out here. Let's roll, Carl.
Get going fast!
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Man, do we have a show for you today? Listen, I want to talk about, obviously, there are a lot of things that are going on in the news. The Congress has just passed another bill to keep the government funded. Obviously, there's the issues still happening in Ukraine. Just so much happening in the news, so much I want to talk about. But I still think, obviously, the biggest issue is what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. And I got to be honest with you, not so much the war itself. I understand that this war, I think it's going to drag on a little longer than a lot of us anticipated, even longer than Putin anticipated. Even though it's obvious that he still has a lot of soldiers. I think James Carafano informed us that he has approximately 800,000 soldiers. But that, even with Putin's artillery and the amount of soldiers that he has, will not be enough to completely overtake Ukraine. It's just a monstrous undertaking for Vladimir Putin. But having said that, I got to ask you this question, or at least I want to present the show in this fashion. And this is what I think has happened. I think Vladimir Putin has outsmarted the metrosexuals of the West. I really think the more I dive into this, I think this is extremely important. And we're going to talk about this. Putin has managed to put the West in a precarious position. And everybody is wondering how this could have happened. Well, I'll get into that. Also, one thing that's important that was in the news today, I think, the Keystone XL developer says it's too late to restart the pipeline project. So this whole ban on Russian oil, which we all feel good about, right? No one wants to help subsidize murdering innocent Ukrainians. But at the same token, there is no plan B either for NATO or for the United States of America. So the Biden administration, at least right here in the United States, has decided to double down and use this war in Ukraine or Russia's invasion of Ukraine to use it as an excuse or as as a way to continue to punish the American people, to beat us into submission, to try the same thing they tried to do with COVID, to get complete and utter control or take complete and utter control of our lives. And the left is going to try to continue to do this because they know their booties are going to get kicked this November in the midterm elections. So the left is doubling down on despotism, if you will. And they're going to make us feel the pain at the pump. They want to try to convince us to go to electrical vehicles that we cannot afford, and then hopefully mass transit once we realize we can't afford that, and then help us to, or try to convince us to move out of the suburbs, or any of you that own farms or acreage or, anywhere within the United States. Life is going to get so miserable. You're going to want to move to a city and be confined within city blocks with a bunch of left-wing loonies that don't know how to do anything except complain about America. We're going to be trapped with them and then controlled like them. That's what the left ultimately wants. But let me get to Putin. Let me tell you how Putin has outsmarted the metrosexuals of the West. So I've been wondering about this. A lot of this stuff just did not make sense to me. Putin doing his thing, this World Economic Forum thing, all of these leaders in the West, these global elites, all of this stuff just seems so crazy. And everybody seems evil to me, right? I'm sorry. The people on the left that are intentionally trying to destroy our lives and this great reset and World Economic Forum, it sounds so crazy, conspiratorial and out there. But then the fact of the matter is there are crazy people like the Klaus Schwabs, evil people like the Klaus Schwabs of the world that want to control people, the Bill Gates of the world that want to control people. We see how these left-wing elites want to control us. It's like we're in a video game. They are completely. I like what Dennis Prager says. They're secular. There's no God in their life. So how do they find meaning and purpose? Well, wherever their mind leads them to find it. That's what they do. They're bored, so they're using us to fulfill their little I don't know, fantasies of being powerful and doing the world some good. They're rich, so they have everything they could ever want or imagine. So what else can they do? It's totally insane. But here's the deal. You have to ask yourself this question. Is Putin a genius? Is Putin a madman? Or did he simply outsmart his geopolitical opponents? And I think I don't think that Putin is necessarily a genius, but he's obviously not dumb. He's obviously extremely intelligent. And I think he outwitted his geopolitical opponents. Let me explain this to you. First, I have to go to a column on Breitbart, Hat Tip Breitbart. Well, let me try to tie this stuff together as I do more research and figure this stuff out a little more for you. All right, Hat Tip Breitbart, World Economic Forum severs Russian ties over Ukraine invasion. Excuse me? Did you guys know that Vladimir Putin was a part of the World Economic Forum? These crazy global elitists like Klaus Schwab that want to rule the world from on high. So, Hat Tip Breitbart, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, has temporarily severed Russian ties in the wake of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. I wonder what Putin was doing at the World Economic Forum. These people don't think like Putin. And I guess that's the point. All right, this is a quote from Amanda Russo. She told this. She spoke to Politico, and she's a spokesperson for the World Economic Forum, and this is what she had to say: "We are not engaging with any sanctioned individual and have frozen all relations with Russian entities." The World Economic Forum also severed ties with the research center in Moscow and an advisory council headed by Russian President Vladimir Putin. The organization added that it would still look to bridge ties between Russia and Ukraine. This according to Politico. So here's the 800-pound gorilla of the elite global conference circuit has walked basically a tightrope for decades when it came to Russia. All right. So basking in the Kremlin's attention, the column goes on to say, while cringing over oligarch antics. Meanwhile, these people in the World Economic Forum are nothing but oligarchs. But it's funny. It's almost as if they were trying to keep Putin close, but Putin was keeping them close. It's interesting. The forum's founder, Klaus Schwab, prides himself on making his annual meeting in Davos open to all comers, including via a personal relationship with Putin dating back to the early 90s. So remember, Putin in 1992 wrote his thesis basically talking about how he wanted to return or restore Russia to the days of old, the USSR. Klaus Schwab embraced him. They became homies. Between 2007 and 2021, Putin and his predecessor, Dmitry Medvedev, have addressed the WEF 5 times, with Putin turning down an invitation to speak in January of 2015 after the invasion of Crimea. So now the world is trying to isolate him, including the World Economic Forum and all of these woke corporations that want to punish the Russian people, but really didn't give a doggone about Russia and what they were trying to do for decades. So, this is all pretty funny, but basically Putin has outsmarted these idiots. Now, hat tip AM greatness. Again, you have to ask yourself, is Putin a genius, a madman, or did he simply outsmart his geopolitical opponents? And again, I think he outsmarted these people. I think it's pretty simple. All of these people talking about how how crazy Putin is. Is Putin really that crazy? No, I mean, I think Putin is evil. I really think this is simple. I think it's really hard for us to grasp in the West, particularly in the United States, where we've had it so good. It's hard for us to grasp evil. It's hard for us to understand that people can be evil. And even if you're a secularist, if you don't, perhaps you don't believe in God, or you're agnostic, or maybe you just don't really think about God or his biblical truths, biblical truths much. You just don't spend a lot of time thinking about evil. You might believe that people are inherently good. I don't. I believe that people are inherently evil. I believe that people are inherently greedy. That's why a baby, when he comes out the womb, some of the first things that a baby does, or some of the first words that a baby will say, is mine, mine, mine. Selfishness, greed, all of this stuff is inherent in people, and it has to be worked out of people. And that's why religion is so important. That's why biblical values, in my opinion, are so important. So whatever you think, Putin's actions have revealed the intellectual shallowness and the weakness of our so-called leaders, our Western leaders, our intellectual leadership class. So when Russia finally invaded Ukraine back in late February, I think it was February 24th, it felt like Russian aggression had achieved the impossible. We were looking at this like, oh my God, is Russia going to attack? Is Russia going to attack? Is Russia going to attack? We were all concerned about that. We were all worried about that. Russia did attack. I thought they might. I wasn't sure, but I thought they might, simply because why the heck else would you build up so many troops on someone's border? It didn't make sense. Not just build them up, but sit there and camp there, almost as if you were trying to figure out a plan or waiting for an opportunity to invade. It just didn't make sense to me. So Putin could have just moved them up to the front line, so to speak, to try to get the West to negotiate terms with him. But Putin had been attending the World Economic Forum, so he knew how weak these metrosexuals were. He knew their game. He knew that they were a bunch of empty suits. He knew that they were a bunch of weak men that had gained a lot of power because they have a lot of money. And he knew that he could expose them. He knew that while they would fight a war of ones and zeros, he could fight a war of ammo, sticks, and stones, and he could beat their behinds because they wouldn't know how to deal with it. And that's exactly what Putin has done. So Putin managed to do what we couldn't do in the United States. I think President Trump came close. He tried to unite the West. He tried to strengthen NATO. He tried to get NATO to pay up, even saying, listen, if you're attacked, why should we pay for it when you're not paying your fair share of NATO? Very smart for Trump to do that. And he got NATO to inch along and pay a little more. Well, Putin, who knows these little metrosexuals, apparently personally, who knows them, he knew he could count on their bluff. The only strong man that gave Putin concern was Trump. And with Trump gone, he knew that he could continue to go forward with his desire to make Russia the USSR again, to make Russia great again. So this is what Putin managed to do, what we couldn't do. He united the West, or at least somewhat. So suddenly the EU, when Putin finally invaded Ukraine, they felt relevant again. You know, all of these people, they existed in their own types of freedom, if you will, for decades on end. No one had to really do anything. So they were bored and they could figure out all these silly ways to try to control their population and the population globally. They just became pretty weak, pretty affluent. And that's all government seemed to be about. So can you imagine how invigorated they must have felt to all of a sudden feel relevant again, to all of a sudden feel like, oh my God, we can actually do, all this stuff that we've been thinking about to try to make the world better. It's really silly. It's really childish. But now with Putin invading Ukraine, this gives us an opportunity to feel relevant again in the EU. Actually, this is purpose. Destroying or stopping a dictator. This is what governments are built up to do, to protect their people, right? So they funded arms deliveries to Ukraine. This is pretty impressive. They stepped up to the plate. This surprised me more than the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. The Westerners, the Metrosexual leaders, stepped up to the plate. They started funding Ukraine. Wow, this is amazing. Germany stepped up. They pledged to spend 100 billion euros on defense, do a one-off to bolster Germany's defenses. Man, so they were stepping up. Putin is like, he's having to think about this stuff. Wait a minute. Did I just unite NATO? Did I just unite the EU? Did I just unite the West against me? It appears so. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz ushered in a quote, new era, unquote, by promising to spend more than 2% of his country's gross national product on the military. He even added, Scholz did, and I quote, President Putin should not underestimate our determination to defend every square meter of NATO territory together with our allies. You notice how these people never seem to say, we are going to defend Germany to the death. Yeah, too metrosexual. They don't have the courage to say that. They're like, we're going to stand up. Hey, will you guys stand up with me? They're weak leaders. They're weak leaders. That's what globalists are. They really are weak leaders. All right, so they're not leaders at all, frankly. All right, and then the quote, international community was poised to cancel the Russian bear. They all imposed harsh sanctions, and they continue to. Woke corporations, these little fascists, these little woke corporations are aligning with the EU and with these NATO countries. We're gonna destroy the Russian bear. We're gonna slap all of the sanctions on this Russian bear. Then all of a sudden, the mood changed. I mean, I was sitting there surprised, like, oh my God, the EU, the NATO, they're stepping up. This is crazy. We're going to take this little thug down. And then the mood changed. So what happened? Oh, I'll tell you what happened. Energy costs skyrocketed. It became obvious that their own sanctions were hurting them. This is why oil and energy is so important. This is why fossil fuels are so important. Guys, we're never going to get off of fossil fuels completely. Nor should we, frankly. This green energy nonsense, listen, if you're down for that, hey, all the more power to you. But please, spare me your virtue signaling. Spare me all this fake morality that you're better than people because you buy into green energy when you have when you have batteries that are built in nations that use child labor and slave labor in some cases, when you have lithium that is shipped over, and lithium batteries shipped over and built by China, who uses Uyghur and are practicing literally genocide on Muslim Uyghurs. So please spare me your virtue signaling. And by the way, when they're building these batteries and when they're building these electrical cars, they do more damage to the environment than the average car with a combustible engine does in its entire lifetime on the road, just in the production process. Not to mention, once you dispose of lithium batteries, do you know how much damage that's doing to the environment? So you're just totally fake. I mean, I'm sorry, if you want to buy an electrical car, buy an electrical car. This is just my rant because I can't stand them. But buy an electrical car. Hey, I don't mind. Have fun with them. I know they got lots of torque. I know they got lots of pickup and speed. But please, if you're trying to save the planet, electrical vehicles aren't going to do that. But getting back to the topic at hand, all of a sudden these leaders, these European leaders in the EU that were stepping up to the plate and calling Putin out, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, all of a sudden their mood changed, and it started changing pretty swiftly. So again, what happened, the energy costs, they were starting to realize were impacting them significantly. Some of this stuff skyrocketed overnight. Oil hit a 14-year high at the beginning of the week. Commodities, whether it was crude oil, wheat, soybeans, all of these have risen between a third and a half over the last few days. So some people are going to starve to death. I'm just being honest with you. This is the pain that these weak leaders have wrought, not just in their countries, but now worldwide. Now, inflation is high and it's set to climb even higher. This is going to destroy the average person's lifestyle, income, their ability to pay for the essentials of life. It's pretty fascinating. Putin understood all of this. While all of these metrosexuals are running to this green energy, weakening their own economies, good old Putin stuck with the basics. So as the consequences of their European policies became more evident, the metrosexual leaders began quickly singing a different tune. Their spines became a little weak. I mean, they were, stiff-backed and standing up strong, and then all of a sudden they start thinking, oh my God, this guy Putin, he really has us in his testicle lockbox, as Rush Limbaugh would have said. And then the walk back began almost as quickly as it started. And it started with Germany. Remember, Schultz was talking tough right from the beginning. Well, the walk back started with Germany. So the tough talk seemed to start with Germany. The walk back started with Germany. So Germany's business minister, Robert Habeck, said, or the Green, he's the German business minister again, notified the world that Germany stood firmly behind Ukraine, but there was a caveat. So he said this, we are strictly against an import ban on oil, gas, or coal from Russia. He added, and I quote, I would even oppose it because we would endanger social peace in the republic, unquote. What do you mean? What do you mean, Robert Habeck? I thought green energy was the route to go. I thought green energy would save the planet. I thought not going green would hurt your people, hurt your economy. And then the Chancellor Schultz, wanted to clarify the issue. So he said this on Monday. He added that Europe had, and I quote, deliberately exempted Russian energy from sanctions because its supply cannot be secured any other way. You see what Putin did? Putin was attending these World Economic Forum meetings with all of these metrosexuals, perhaps the only man in the building. And then German Chancellor Scholz a week ago insisted NATO would not intervene in the conflict, highlighting rightly perhaps, and I'm sure that he was, the dangers involved in dealing with the nuclear power. Obviously, listen, I love what Volodymyr Zelensky is doing. I give props to that man, but Ukraine is not a NATO nation. But I think we should have done everything possible to supply these people with Javelin missiles, Stingers, intelligence, whatever they needed before this conflict began. And I do think morally, I do think in part our weakness is responsible for what's happening in Ukraine. Biden had ample time to act and to help Ukraine. Well, Carl, we would have started World War III. Well, how come we didn't? How come we didn't when Trump gave them javelins and stingers? How come we didn't start it then? See, Trump was a strong man. And what Putin recognized from these metrosexuals is that they simply were not. They were fighting a war of ones and zeros. These overlords wanted to be these global elitists that controlled us with their banking systems and everything else they were thinking of at the World Economic Forum. the big tech media, censorship, all of this kind of stuff. They were going to control the language. They were going to control how we live. They were going to control how we drive. They were going to control property, whether or not we could even own property. We weren't going to own anything, and we were going to love it. But Putin had something different to say, and they eventually had to bow down. See, the problem, half of Germany's gas supply depends upon Russia, comes from Russia. So an import ban would mean economic collapse for Germany. And so Germany is willing to stand with Ukraine as long as it doesn't cost them their economy, which it would. So it's like, okay, we can only talk tough, but we really can't do anything about it. And then the collapse continues. The Metrosexuals continue to line up. The Dutch Prime Minister said the same thing. Mark Rutte said the same thing. He said the, quote, painful reality is we are still very much dependent on Russian gas and Russian oil. And if you now force European companies to quit doing business with Russia, and notice they all talk like this, all right? With Russia, that would, they're whiny, little whiny metrosexuals. That would have enormous ramifications around Europe, including Ukraine, but also around the world. And then there was British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who shares Trump's hairstyle, but apparently not his cojones. And he said, the world cannot close down the use of oil and gas overnight, even from Russia. And he's correct. He's correct. And then China bolsters Russia. China comes into play. In the meantime, on the same day at the press conference 5,000 miles away in Beijing, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi called the Russian-China axis, and I quote, one of the most crucial bilateral relationships in the world. Look at this. India and Pakistan, they remain silent. So in another blow to Western leadership, India remains silent, along with the irony of ironies, Pakistan, India's greatest rival. India has a history of non-alignment. It also has a very long historical standing of ties with Russia, in particular in the field of armament. All right. So Putin isn't, Putin was playing them. The World Economic Forum and all of these metrosexuals and the EU and NATO thought they were playing Putin, calling him a crazy man. But all along, Putin was playing them. They were playing with ones and zeros. He was playing with sticks and stones and just common sense. And eventually, he appears to have won out. The fact is, the world is not united, guys. The world has never been united. It rarely is. Again, if ever, I don't think the world has ever been truly united. And now, all of these globalists, I want you to consider this. I think this is a very important point. All of these globalists are now confined or constrained by their ability to act against a dictator because of their national interests. So all of these globalists that want everyone to be globalists and they want to rule the world from on high, just these global elites are constrained by their country's national interest. And Putin outsmarted them. Oh, simple little Putin outsmarted them. So here's what's noticeable. Now, the little desire to stand up for Ukraine, again, beyond the platitudes and propaganda. And what's the reason for this? It's simple. That it's been a long while since the leaders gave any thought to geopolitical strategy. These people have been, these leaders, they've been living in a fairy tale land for so long because they too have had it good. Granted, Europe isn't as great, I believe, as the United States of America, but nonetheless, they've experienced a type of freedom beyond the socialism, high welfare state, so on, etc. All right, but they've experienced a type of freedom that's kind of made them fat and lazy. When you don't have to fight for freedom, you forget how good freedom is. And that's exactly what's happening. So the dominating view among our superiors has been and still remains the creation of a world without nation states, a world without borders. Yet, again, they're having to protect their national interests. because one man by the name of Vladimir Putin has exposed these weakless European metrosexuals for who they are. Now, this nirvana, this going back to the column, Hat Tip AM Greatness, this nirvana would be ruled by a small group of enlightened people through the agency of international bureaucracies, out of reach of the electorate dirty grasp and out of touch with much else besides. And that's what they were trying to do. What these global elitists want to do is take government away from us. They want to circumvent the will of the people, whether it's right here in the United States, whether it's in the EU. So while we weaken ourselves in the West, Russia just took advantage of that. It's really simple. The West spent the last couple of decades untethering itself from realities, focusing on this stupid, arbitrary climate change and climate targets. We disinvested in our own energy and infrastructure, our capabilities, and we provided no actual alternatives or solutions to the people, which I'll get to. This is exactly what Biden is doubling down on evil. The left is, the Democrat Party right here in the United States. I'll get to that certainly. So Russia used our leaders that were distracted mentally, or their distracted mental state. Meanwhile, they're calling Putin crazy, but they use his distracted mental state he used their distracted mental state to establish energy supremacy, both in the West and in the East. So tell me who's crazy now. Oh man, the world didn't change with the invasion of Ukraine. Putin has proven that the world is the same tough place that it always has been. There's always going to be one leader wanting to get ahead of the other. And apparently, gender identity and CRT doesn't trump fossil fuel energy. We're learning that. An important lesson. I hope Americans learn it. Yeah, this gender identity, CRT, all this crap. What matters is what's essential. And what is essential is energy. Fossil fuels are important. It's government's role to advance the way of life and maintain the way of life for its citizens. Unfortunately, that's not what our leaders in the West have been doing, and they've been caught with their pants down. They've been slipping for decades now, while Putin has been trying to figure out how to make his country, how to make the U.S. or Russia great again. I'm sorry. We've been figuring out how to weaken America. It's a really sad state of affairs. But, instead what the left has done, or what the West has done, they've managed to dismantle our inheritance of freedom. They managed to dismantle their inheritance of freedom. Now they're beholden. To a dictator. Now they have to subsidize the murder of Ukrainians. They've got blood on their hands. All of these European metrosexual leaders have blood on their hands. They're just empty suits. They're empty suits. And the world is better off without empty suits. The world needs real leaders because there's crazy people in the world. There's dangerous people in the world. And if you don't stand up to dictators like Putin, if you don't protect your own national interests, then you're liable to get a lot of innocent people slaughtered like we see happening in Ukraine. This column goes on to say, for a brief moment, the world seemed to bask in a new light of international cooperation and enjoying the thrill of imposing supposedly cost-free sanctions on Russia. And as our news media delighted in reporting the crash of the ruble, the pending default of Russia's sovereign bonds, and the banning of Russia TV from our screens, yeah, that makes them feel good. Yet, when Putin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was asked about Western sanctions, he said his chief was indifferent. Because they still have to pay him for oil. Putin is a simple man, and he's known what he wanted for decades. And sadly, from a position of apparently weakness, Putin made Russia indispensable. They thought he was weak. Russia's this tiny country. Putin is this nut, insane guy. He's never going to do anything. Barack Obama, Russia's a tiny little country. So Russia is indispensable, and now hard to hurt. Even if his troops suck, even if they're not performing as well as the world thought, it doesn't matter because he has the EU and a testicle lockbox, every single one of the metrosexuals, and they have to bow down to Putin, and they have to continue to subsidize his murder of innocent Ukrainian people. I hope you Ukrainian people wake up. I hope you Europeans wake up. I hope you stand up against all of these metrosexuals in NATO, all of these metrosexuals in the EU, these metrosexuals that are these evil metrosexuals that are associated with the World Economic Forum. They're dangerous. They're dangerous people. He played them like a violin. Putin played them like a violin, even attending the World Economic Forum, speaking at the World Economic Forum 5 times. You guys notice Xi Jinping is doing the same thing, right? So while these leaders think they're going to take over the entire world and influence the entire world with ones and zeros, you have Xi Jinping willing to use force. You have Russian President Vladimir Putin willing to use force. And here's the bottom line. Mike Tyson said it best. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So all of these metrosexuals in the EU may have a plan. All of these guys in NATO may have a plan. They all want to be, open borders, global elite, so on. We are the world, all these kind of people. But the bottom line are there's still people like Putin and Xi Jinping and the leaders of there's Turkey, there's Erdogan, there's Pakistan, there's India, there's men, whether you like them or not. There's people that say, I'm a man, I'm standing up for my country. What are you going to do about it? And they're going to punch you in the face. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And then there's the Tales from the Crypt Keeper, formerly inhabiting the White House, President. I can't even say that word. Patooey. I got to spit it out. Joe Biden. This breaking today. Hat tip Washington Examiner. The Keystone XL developer says it's too late to restart pipeline project. The crunch at the gas pump, exacerbated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, has led to calls in conservative circles to restart the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. Why is that controversial? But those calls may be nothing more than a pipe dream. The cross-border multi-billion-dollar project fell victim to partisan politics in the early days of the Biden administration, when Joe Biden, in one of his first acts, signed an executive order halting production of the pipeline stretching from the Canadian border through the Dakotas to refineries in the Gulf Coast. You heard a lot about this Keystone XL pipeline. I should have mentioned the title to you because that's what's really important. Maybe I did. Maybe I forgot, but I'll read it again. If I did, even Keystone XL developer says it's too late to restart pipeline project. So Biden is doubling down on evil. There is a war to keep you poor, and Biden and the far left the Democratic Party are Biden is the general, along with all of his followers in the Democratic Party, and they all need to be punished this November, and again in November in 2024, again in November 2026, again in November 2028, so on, etc. The article continues. Soaring gas prices raise hope the administration may revisit the decision to mothball the project. It gained even more traction on Monday when Alberta Premier Jason Kenney said the financial squeeze at pumps could be alleviated if the project was restarted. You got a Canadian that wants oil. He says, Jason Kenney does, and I quote, "We could turn this around in less than a year." His comments come as crude prices surge to almost $140 a barrel. And we are all paying this at the pump. I kid you not, approximately a year ago, even just right after Trump left office a month or two, had been in office for a month or two, I was paying approximately $45 a month to fill up my car. This was with premium unleaded, $45 or so, approximately thereabouts, give or take, a buck or two. So thereabouts, right? I mean, 3/4 of the tank the other day, it cost me just over $60. It's insane. And all of us are having to make choices. I can't afford to just spend money like that. So all of us are having to make choices, about this ban on Russian oil. It sounds great, but the problem is Biden isn't doing anything on our end in order to help us alleviate prices at the pump. He's blaming Putin. So by banning Russian oil, well, we could pump here. We could pump right in Alaska. As a matter of fact, let me go on. We could turn this around in less than a year. Again, this is what Jason Kenney says. Now, but here's what the TC Energy, the Canadian developer behind the Keystone XL project, poured cold water on the idea of it ever getting back up and running on Tuesday, and he told the Washington Examiner this, and I quote, "The Keystone XL pipeline project was terminated in June of 2021 and will not proceed. ¿Por qué? The monumental decision to walk away from the $8 billion project came at a devastating cost to communities that pinned their hopes and investments on the success of the massive venture." So South Dakota hotel owner Lori Cox, who bought a 2-story hotel in Midland and housed pipeline workers before the project was pulled, said that although it's exciting to think about the pipeline coming back, it's hard not to see the writing on the wall. She recently drove past some of the man camps built to accommodate thousands of skilled workers hired to build the pipeline. The mostly abandoned work sites left little hope of a comeback. Cox told the Washington Examiner that two work camps are completely barren. She says the man camp outside of Phillip still has a few trailers, but it's as dead could be. She said the pod stations appear to be abandoned. There's nothing there, she says. Cox said employees of Precision Pipeline came in September and removed heavy equipment from one of the sites, including all of the trailers. Others, speaking on condition of anonymity because they are not authorized to discuss the sale, told the Washington, listen, they're not allowed to discuss the sale. But someone speaking speaking anonymously said, or told the Washington Examiner, parts were sold for 30% less than the asking price. So if Keystone XL were to restart, the column goes on to say, it would mean rehiring workers, buying back pricey equipment, setting up housing, dealing with environmentalists. And personally, guys, I got to tell you, I have a family member that was affected by the shutdown of the Keystone XL pipeline. A 6-figure job gone like that. It's amazing. So with environmentalists, let me just read this over. If Keystone XL were to restart, it would mean rehiring workers, buying back pricey equipment, setting up housing, dealing with environmentalists opposed to the drilling, and getting small businesses burned by Biden's decision to agree to reinvest in virtual ghost towns. So even if all of the obstacles were removed, it's unlikely XL would do anything to ease the sticker shock many drivers currently see at the pumps. The United States has slapped a list of sanctions on Russia in response to its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, but until this week had avoided targeting the country's oil sector out of fear it would cause crude prices to spike. Biden's announcement he would ban the import of Russian oil and gas did just that. However, the White House claims high gas prices are Russian President Vladimir Putin's fault and could be brought down by gas companies should they choose to do so. That's simply not true. Russia is the world's 3rd largest oil producer and is responsible for 10% of the global supply. This according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration data. But Republicans have called on Biden to increase the domestic oil production. The challenge is, this comes from Steve Scalise told the Wall Street Journal. He's the House Republican whip, and I quote, "The challenge is that President Biden still won't say yes to American energy because to replace that Russian oil is the real critical step. The answer is right below our feet." So if prices won't go down, if we reopen the Keystone XL pipeline and begin a drill baby drill and all of the above approach to energy in the United States again, like we did under Trump, you're telling me it's impossible for prices to go down? If that's the case, why did they? Why did they under Trump when he tried that approach? Why did they in 2008, right before George W. Bush left office and the prices had soared to $4.11 on average? Again, that was a record-breaking amount at that period of time. And then George W. Bush, before leaving office, was able to get it back down simply by talking about we're going to do an all-of-the-above approach. So it happened before. Why can't it happen now? It's simply because the left doesn't want it to happen. The column goes on to say, the crisis is a stark reminder that to protect our economy over the long term, we have to become energy independent. Biden said, loosening environmental regulations or pulling back clean energy investment won't lower energy prices for families. So Biden doesn't intend to reverse course whatsoever. He wants us to feel the pain at the pump. Okay, so now let me take you somewhere else. Because Biden has been talking about, hey, this Russian oil, this import ban, the reason why prices are going up, prices are going to go up. Suck it up, Buttercup. If you're a true American, you're going to be okay with this pain. Do it for the sake of freedom. Take one in the gas tank for the sake of freedom. I don't know. But what they continue to do is say, hey, it's not my fault. The prices are going up because of this Russian oil ban. And they think that we're as mentally out of it as Biden is himself, and we can't remember that, wait a minute, even before Putin invaded Ukraine just 2 short weeks ago, prices of gas and fuel continued to skyrocket. These people think we're idiots. It's insane. So we know he's lying, but he is telling a half-truth, and that's what I want to go into, because he is not lying, the crypt keeper, when he says, listen, we're producing more oil than ever before. Fossil fuels, it's not my fault. It's Putin's fault. Blame Putin. There's a level of truth to that, but I'm going to expose the lie. So, Hat Tip Daily Signal. Let's look at natural gas for starters. In October of 2021, LNG exporters in the U.S. were operating beyond capacity. They were basically punching above their weight. And the U.S. Energy Information Administration expects the U.S. will export 16% more natural gas this year than last year, as American companies bring on more production and export more capacity. So by the end of 2022, by the end of this year, the U.S. will have the largest LNG export capacity in the world, with the completion of the Sabine Pass and the Calcasieu, I don't know how to pronounce this word, or Calcasieu Pass facilities in Louisiana, as well as upgrades to increase production at several existing facilities. An eighth export facility in Texas is expected to come online by 2024, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has approved several other projects that are not yet under construction. So it is true that we are producing more fossil fuels than we have in the past. That's true. Now, take a look at oil in 2020. And even through the worst of the pandemic into 2021, U.S. producers of crude oil and petroleum products made in the U.S. A net exporter for the first time since 1949. We were a net exporter in, 72 years? So the U.S. is the world's largest producer of crude oil, even as global demand has outpaced supply over the last year. And that's in part, partly that's why we see an increase in prices, because the global demand has outpaced the supply. And this is over the last year, and that has strained the global market some. The Energy Information Administration cautiously projects crude oil production in the U.S. to continue growing to meet the demand over the next few years. So the columnist at the Heritage Foundation says that it's hard to overstate how revolutionary the American energy boom has been since its onset in the late 2000s, no thanks to Barack Obama. So in less than a decade, the U.S. went from projections of energy shortages to being the largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world. It was actually George W. Bush, before he left office, that really began this boom. Right after we experienced those high prices in 2008. The media doesn't want to tell you that. Congress's 2015 lifting of the ban on oil and gas exports turned the U.S. So I want you to understand this. Congress's 2015 lifting of the ban on oil and gas exports turned the U.S. from a bench sitter into a major global supplier that diversified energy markets. So this wasn't Obama's doing. Obama didn't have anything to do with this. This guy, the global warming king at the time, was trying to make sure that we ushered in or fundamentally changed America. But thank God with the help of the Tea Party, we won back Congress in 2010. We were able to slow his roll. By 2020, American companies supply 16% of the world's oil and 21% of its natural gas, more than any other country. And the Energy Information Administration expects U.S. energy production in 2023 to beat the record-setting year of 2019. Americans' average total energy cost fell by 5% from 2018 to 2019, and per capita energy costs decreased in every state except California. And that's because of their burdensome regulations. Thanks to robust domestic energy production, Americans today are more protected when global energy prices go up. U.S. energy providers have also filled the gap for Europe, which has been caught with their pants down. That's not the columnist, that's me. That's been caught with their pants down, and their import relying on Russia, or after years of policy choices that destroyed their own energy production, basically, or minimized their own energy production. Now they're beholden to a dictator. Now they're complicit in the murder of innocents in Ukraine. So U.S. natural gas exports to Europe have increased since 2017, supplying 26% of Europe's liquid natural gas in 2021 and more than half in January 2022. And this is in response to Russia's weaponization of its energy markets. So the Energy Policy or Energy Research Foundation estimates that the flood of American natural gas into global markets has kept prices in check and saved Europe $143.2 billion over the last 13 years. Now, here's the caveat. So all of that to say, and I read all of that so that you would understand there is truth to when Biden talks about, yeah, well, it's not my fault. You know, this is why he can get away with it, or this is how the left, the media helps him get away with this lie that prices are going up, not because of what he's doing, because we're drilling and we're pumping out more fossil fuels than ever before, which is partly true, which is a half truth, and then allow him to blame Russia, which isn't true. So here's the caveat. Hat tip to Heritage Foundation again. This tremendous level of energy production is happening because it's being done on private and state lands, and despite the Biden administration's anti-energy posture. So over the last year, Biden has directed federal regulatory agencies to implement policies that have severely constrained the energy resources that meet 79% of Americans. The total energy needs and fuel, or 79% of Americans' total energy needs and fuel over 90% of transportation into the U.S. In other words, policies that are in direct conflict with the interests and well-being of Americans. So while asking American energy companies for short-term increases in production to bail his behind out, my words, not theirs, the administration out of political trouble, Biden has made it very clear that his administration intends to put coal, oil, and perhaps even natural gas industries in America out of business. This is a caveat that's been noted in so many of the Energy Information Administration's energy projections for the future. They are blatantly admitting, at least in their paperwork, that they intend to destroy the fossil fuel energy in America. They intend to go the way of the metrosexuals in Europe. This is what the Democrat Party wants to do using the crypt keeper Biden in the White House. They want to make us dependent on people like Putin that are going to continue, that aren't going to get rid of fossil fuels. You got China opening up more coal-fired fire plants, or whatever. So all of these people aren't getting rid of this stuff. India, Pakistan again is silent. These people are like, are you nuts? You guys go play this green energy nonsense all you want. It's not going to do anything to save the environment per se. Yes, our air is cleaner than theirs, but let's be honest. This virtue signaling while we're pretending to be these moralists. By cutting back fossil fuels here, yet we buy fossil fuels from dictators like Putin, who burns coal dirtier than we do makes no sense whatsoever. They're just fake. They're just phony. This is all about control. It's not about a clean environment. The column goes on to say, in addition to regulations that make it harder and more expensive to produce and use conventional energy, the administration has hung its hat on a very narrow approach to innovation. The White House has advocated sapping the American economy of hundreds of billions of dollars in tax favors and spending hundreds of billions more on a narrow set of politically preferred, unproven energy technologies, renewable energies, that the administration presumes are the solution to global warming. And again, I don't think they believe it's the solution to global warming. I don't think there is man-made global warming, to be honest. But I don't think, even if there were a minimal effect, I don't believe they believe that. This is about control. In reality, the column goes on to say this isn't pro-growth innovation policy. It's not even climate policy. This is old-fashioned political cronyism. As Europe has experienced, such a foolhardy approach comes with incredible financial costs to taxpayers, political vulnerabilities, and deep concerns about the reliability and the stability of the energy supply. It's also not based in reality. Such a command and control approach has not worked in the past, and it's likely not to work in the future. This is especially true given that Biden's own Energy Information Administration projects, listen to this, no scenario in which global demand for oil and natural gas does not increase through at least 2050. So they're just destroying the fossil fuel sector on purpose. With this stuff it's not gonna work. The global demand is still gonna be necessary. So what are they doing? They're trying to control us. In regions of the world where bad actors like Russia use energy as a weapon, the benefits of American-produced energy extend far beyond the economic gains. Unlike Russia, American energy companies are not a mere extension of the government. They offer more choice through transparent, competitive, and reliable energy resources, markets, and contract. America's economic freedom has created this environment, and it is one of its greatest selling points. It's time to fight authoritarianism with energy freedom instead of continuing to put obstacles in the way. Biden needs to reevaluate and reprioritize and unleash the American energy sector for the benefit of America and the world. So Biden, in order to shorten the supply even further, while demand increases for this stuff, he has tied the hands of a lot of these oil and natural gas producers, and he's doing this intentionally. So don't let him continue to lie to you. He wants to look good, banning Russian oil and all this kind of stuff, but he's no different than the metrosexuals and the empty suits of the EU. He is destroying the energy sector in the United States. And even though they are punching above their weight, so to speak, they could be doing a heck of a lot more were it not for the regulatory burdens imposed on them by the Biden administration. So he is completely lying. State and private lands, they can drill, baby drill, but where they have access to federal properties, they can no longer drill. And I already read you the column from the Washington Examiner, how pieces of the Keystone XL pipeline are being completely sold off, or have been, for 30% under their value, just to destroy our oil producers here. It's insane. It's insane what we're going through, but don't let them lie to you again. Anyway, I appreciate you guys tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please remember to like my Facebook page, Carl Jackson Radio. Check out my website, carljacksonshow.com. Parler and Twitter, same feed at Carl Jackson Show. And then wherever podcasts can be found, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you prefer going, Rumble and YouTube. We really want to get those numbers up on the video outlet. So please like, subscribe, share those. And I promise you, I will be in the trenches with you as long as it takes to restore this nation to its prominence. Until next time, guys, don't grow weary doing good, and God bless you.